Very young Venus flytraps grow very slowly because there simply aren't insects small enough to fit into the traps that they can eat. They have to rely upon their inefficient root system growing in very poor soils. If you're able to feed a young Venus flytrap, it can easily grow 3 to 4 times as fast as one out in the wild. This video will show how you can feed a trap that's so small that no insect can fit in it. I'm using a slightly larger Venus flytrap just for photographic reasons. A smaller one would be so small that even with a macro lens you wouldn't be able to see much detail. Like many Venus flytrap enthusiasts, I feed my flytraps freeze-dried bloodworms. This works great for larger traps, but for really small traps, as you can see, the bloodworms are long, thin tubes, and they're very difficult to cut apart and get to be small enough to feed a small trap. To make the bloodworms easier to feed to small traps, I use a coffee grinder to grind the bloodworms up into a very fine powder. This only takes a few seconds. What happens when you grind up your bloodworms is that a 0.4 ounce container like this, which has this much in it, will be reduced in volume to that much. This is actually nice because you can grind up a lot of bloodworms and store them in a smaller container. These will hydrate much easier and quicker. And in fact, although I developed this system for feeding very small fly traps, I now use ground up bloodworms to feed to all of my traps. They're much easier to portion into the appropriate amount. One word of caution, this is very concentrated food. So while most Venus flytrap references suggest filling the traps to a third to a maximum of half full, I go with a very small amount of this, usually about a quarter of the trap length in the shape of a small ball. If you use more, it takes longer for the trap to digest it, and many times the food will start to rot before it's completely digested and you lose the trap. A little of the powder goes a long way. A quarter of a teaspoon will easily feed several dozen fly traps. I use about 1/8 of a teaspoon at a time, and to that, after spreading it around to help the water be absorbed, I add 10 drops of distilled water. Initially, the powder repels the water, so spread it around in separate drops so that it doesn't pool up and make things harder to be absorbed. Once it looks like the drops have been pretty much absorbed, use a small knife, or in this case, a letter opener, to mash the powder into the water until you get a nice, smooth, even paste. Like that. Using a toothpick, pick up the very smallest possible speck imaginable for the smallest traps. It's difficult to believe, but those traps need bits of food that are so small they're almost microscopic. If you use too big a piece, the trap won't close properly and will rot and die. Very carefully insert the tip of the toothpick with the bit of food on it into the trap, rotate it to allow it to come off, and deposit it as low into the trap as possible so that the two sides can close in and seal tightly. Afterwards, very carefully squeeze the trap approximately 30 to 40 times to stimulate live food so that the trap knows that it's good to close and begin the digestion cycle. And that's it. With this technique, you can help your baby Venus flytraps grow much faster. Thank you for watching.